What's up, everybody? It's Sosa MMA back with another video. So, I was gonna go to bed and not record any content today, but Dana decided to drop news at bedtime as he likes to do. And if you've seen the short, you already know, and if you've seen the thumbnail, you already know as well, that Khamzat Chimaev and Robert Whittaker are gonna duke it out for the first ever fight night in Saudi Arabia. And one thing I didn't have the time to say in that short is that it is for the number one contendership at middleweight. So if Robert Whittaker wins this, we could be seeing that Dracus Duplessis rematch. Khamzat Chimaev wins this, and he could be getting his first crack at UFC Gold. Like I said, I was going to go to bed, so the vibe for this video is going to be a lot more chill than they typically are. And we're just going to shoot the shit and talk about this really banger fight night that we've got booked here. So we're obviously going to start at the top with this Khamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whittaker matchup, and there's so much to discuss. It obviously starts off with striker versus grappler because at the root of it, that's what it is. It's one of the best grapplers that the UFC has to offer against one of the best strikers that the UFC has to offer as well. So you could really see a dominant victory for either guy. If Khamzat isn't capable of getting this fight down to the ground, expect him to either get his ass beat for 25 minutes or get finished by Robert Whittaker for the first time that Whittaker's finished anybody in 8 years. That actually might be close to the amount of time. I don't even know. That actually might have been accidentally correct when I was fucking around. But I'm going to light this joint up before I start talking about the side of Khamzat on this. But first off, what a great fight. I think this is a fight a lot of us have wanted to see since Khamzat moved up to middleweight. Getting to see him tested against somebody who is a high caliber middleweight before he fights for the belt is great too. Him getting the belt after, or to fight for the belt after fighting Paulo Costa wouldn't have ruffled my feathers, but I think it would have ruffled some people's feathers. And you really can't say that he's as championship ready coming off of a win against Paulo Costa, even if it's a finish, than he would be if he was to get past Whittaker by any means, right? And that's one thing too to think about is that the experience of Whittaker going 5 rounds is something Khamzat doesn't have any of, because before he came to the UFC, he was blitzing guys and finishing them extremely rapidly. One of the exceptions being like Ikram Aliskerov, who he still brutalized. And Whittaker's gone the distance. He's been in main events. He's done it many times. He's fought people who have the pressure of Khamzat too. Even if, yeah, I wouldn't say that he's fought anybody with the grappling the caliber of Khamzat. The closest you could say would be Jacare, who might be close when you get to the ground in terms of jiu-jitsu threat, but I honestly view a lot of these Dagestanis as a greater jiu-jitsu threat than a lot of these traditional jiu-jitsu guys. Like, take a Gilbert Burns, for example. He is incredible defensively with his jiu-jitsu. You're going to have an impossible time getting him in any bad spots, but he's not submitting anybody. Islam Makhachev gets more submissions. Like, I'm more scared if Islam is on top of me in a wrestling scenario or a jiu-jitsu scenario than I am Gilbert Burns, and I'm honest with you about that. Do I see Khamzat finishing Rob on the ground, though? No, I don't. Doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. Like, I think there's a very real possibility. I just, when I see Khamzat winning this in my head, I don't see it being like that. I see it being sloppy still. I don't think we'll see a flawless performance for him or an early finish where he gets Whittaker to tap. And I don't think he's going to chin Whittaker the way DDP did either. I think he could definitely finish Whittaker. And I think that he could finish him on the feet, but it can't just be like him striking it out with Whittaker. He's got to do a lot of the damage on the ground and have like an exhausted, frightened Whittaker in front of him who's going to be making mistakes on the feet, who's going to be thinking about the takedown. Because Khamzat does have power in his hands, and he has power in his hands at middleweight, too. We saw him spark out literally the middleweight GOAT, Gerald Meerschaert. So if you can knock out Gerald Mearshart, you can knock out anybody at middleweight. Like, I'm sorry. That guy is better than everybody else in the division. He is the champion of the division for a reason, is Gerald Mearshart. So you have to put some respect on that. People saying that Khamzat has no wins at middleweight are putting some disrespect on that resume. And you also have to think about the fact that, like, Dracus is an incredible fighter, and we've come to learn that. If you didn't respect Dracus like almost nobody did, you have to now, that he's holding middleweight gold, and you had to after he beat Bobby Knuckles as well. And that round one that he was having with Whittaker was pretty competitive until he managed to get that takedown, and he was landing some nice ground and pound on Whittaker too. Do I think that Dracus is the more severe offensive threat on the ground between him and Khamzat? I don't. I think that Dracus is more physical at 185 for sure. Because that dude's fucking ginormous. I don't even know how he makes 185 consistently. It's ridiculous. But he's not an offensive threat on the ground, the caliber of Khamzat. He was competitive with Derek Brunson on the ground. And obviously Derek Brunson's a calibered wrestler as well. But when we saw Khamzat Chimaev take on Kamaru Usman in round one, he was dominating Kamaru Usman. He won that round 10-8. And that's something you got to think about in this. And obviously, as a short notice Kamaru Usman, that has to take into effect too. But if I was to tell you right now, without ever having seen the two grapple, who I think the better grappler is between Dracus and Khamzat, I'm telling you Khamzat, and it's the repetitions. You're just not going to get the caliber competition that Khamzat has been training against in the gym that Dracus has access to, and with the training partners that Dracus has access to. You won't be a grappler the caliber of Khamzat when you aren't focusing it as much as Khamzat does. And obviously Dracus's weird, sloppy, unorthodox striking is a lot more problematic and posed Whittaker more problems than I expect Khamzat striking will. And that's kind of the offset where Dracus is able to be more successful in that realm because he's put more time into it, obviously. But if Dracus could get him down and cause problems there, and have that be part of his game plan significantly against Robert Whittaker, not only part of the game plan, but part of the game plan that worked to ultimately finish him. Can Khamzat do that too? Yeah, he can. Can he finish him the same way Dracus did? That's not what I'm saying. I don't think Khamzat has Dracus's power because I think Dracus has some of the best power at 185. But Khamzat isn't pillow hands. And while his cardio has looked suspicious in these fights, I think that's less so a cardio issue, as I kind of alluded to in that short I recorded, and more so an issue of pace. And it all comes down to kind of how you train and how you fight once you get into the octagon. Because you have people like Merab, and obviously Merab's at 135, so it scales differently down there, but he's not like picking up 185 pound on the night of the fight, probably 205, 210 pound dudes throwing them around and stuff like that, right? That's going to take a lot more out of your gas tank, but relatively, Merab's gas tank, if you were to like pound for pound at Khamzat, way better. He can afford to go out and have a crazy output round one because you know that motherfucker's not going to gas. That dude's on so much EPO. He has to be. There's just no way he could be natty when he's like underwater swimming across Olympic pools type shit. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. But the reason Khamzat fights like that isn't the reason that Merab fights like that. You get what I mean? It kind of is, but it also kind of isn't. Because the reason Merab fights like that is because he can. Like, his cardio can actually do that. If he doesn't finish the guy, which he doesn't ever, then he can go 25 plus minutes. Like, when the fight's over, he doesn't really even look tired. He looks like he could continue at that pace for another fight.
Khamzat can't do that. So that's not the reason he does it. That's where the difference is. But Khamzat does that because he can, or at least he used to be able to. And because he was running through guys, blitzed Li Jing Liang, had that blip against Gilbert Burns, still was able to blitz through Kevin Holland, blitzed my GOAT, Gerald Mearshart. He finished like everybody he fought extremely fast, so it's just in his mind. That's what he's going to do to every person. And to be fair, against Kamaru Usman, he had his back. He was dominating him in the grappling. And we're not talking about some bum, okay? And I don't want to hear the short notice excuses, right? Short notice can impact a lot of things, right? Do I think that Kamaru Usman would have been more prepared for the entries of Khamzat Chimaev if he had a camp for that fight? Yes. Do I still expect that Khamzat Chimaev would have taken him down and controlled him for round one and dominated him the same way he did? Yeah, I do expect that because he's just that good in round one, but he can't keep that pace. I don't know if there's something he's going to be able to implement in camp where he's going to, put himself in worse situations. He's going to have more of a focus on his conditioning this camp, what he's going to have to do to overcome that, or if he's going to have to fundamentally change how he fights these rounds and implement his grappling and his striking in a more educated way where he's not just forcing out all of his cardio in round one. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is a cardio issue. It's not a pace issue. His cardio just got fucked by COVID. He just sucks ass now, and he has no fucking gas tank whatsoever. That's totally a possibility. That could be the case. We will see at some point if he ever changes how he fights in any way or shows us what he's capable of in terms of a gas tank over a 5-round contest. That's one of the biggest, most interesting things for me because you have a guy who we have no questions about him going 5 rounds. He can do it. He's done it. He can look great all 5 rounds. He can turn it on in the last 3 rounds. He can turn it on those championship rounds. We've seen him do it against Yoel Romero before. And then you have a guy who we've never seen go 5 rounds before who struggles to even go 3. That's extremely interesting. You can't be disinterested in that. Now, Robert Whittaker winning this fight is fairly simple. I mean, it's not really anything that Robert Whittaker does necessarily. Now, could he, obviously, if the best Khamzat Chimaev shows up, win this fight? I do think so. I think Robert Whittaker is the caliber of fighter who could do that. I think I could see him having enough grappling to keep the fight on the feet and do enough damage to at least win 3 rounds against a prime Khamzat Chimaev who's doing his best. But I think what's more likely is that if a prime on it Khamzat shows up, that Rob Whittaker is not going to win this fight. And that might be a hot take. Maybe people don't like that. They think that if it's prime for prime, Whittaker can still win that. I don't really think that's the case. I think if we see a Khamzat who is fighting intelligently, who is not fighting to gas out in round one, not fighting to try and finish Robert Whittaker in round one like he's the leech, then we see Khamzat win this fight probably 90 times out of 10. 90 times out of 100. And the main reason for that is because Robert Whittaker doesn't really have the finishing threat that he needs to severely punish Khamzat. Am I saying I don't see Robert Whittaker having any chance of finishing? Not remotely. I think that Robert Whittaker's greatest chance of winning this fight could be by finishing Khamzat Chimaev late as he gasses out from early exertion. I think that's an incredible chance for Robert Whittaker to win this fight, even though it's not due to his own finishing power. And that's kind of the main problem there, is that if he's going to win this fight by finish, I don't think it's because of anything he does. I don't think it's a smart setup. I don't think it is damage adding up over the course of the rounds to finish Khamzat that he would add up even if it was a prime Khamzat. Once again, I think it's Khamzat gassing out and giving Robert Whittaker the opportunity to finish him in this fight. But I think what would be more likely is that he wins it by decision. And if he does win it by decision, I could see Khamzat Chimaev winning round one dominantly, maybe even a 10-8 or 10-7 depending, getting Whittaker in some really bad positions, landing some brutal ground and pound on him, even cutting him open. I could see him threatening submissions and getting really close with them, but Whittaker withstanding those. And then even as early as round two, Khamzat beginning to let up off the pace, the shots beginning to be more telegraphed. Whittaker starts to shuck those off, starts to land at will with his long attacks, starts to land leg kicks on Khamzat, starts to spin him around with leg kicks, maybe even feints his own takedowns or shoots his own takedowns to make Khamzat start thinking about that while he's tired on the feet, and starts throwing up high kicks as well, of course, to not only get blood swelling up in Khamzat's arms, but also just to constantly add to that threat. And if one of them sneaks through, it's serious damage. It's very fast and hard to block too, especially if you start getting tired from gassing yourself out in the wrestling. So that's where that opportunity for Robert Whittaker to finish Khamzat comes in. But again, hot take, I think that Robert Whittaker's chances of winning this fight come down to Khamzat Chimaev not learning from his two hardest fights in the UFC against Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman. If he does, if he takes the lessons that he's supposed to learn from those fights, then in my opinion, he beats Robert Whittaker. But I think that that's a good enough discussion about that one. Let's talk about this great co-main event. We got a Russian heavyweight clash here between Volkov and Pavlovich. Now, I was thinking about Volkov versus Almeida, I think, because I thought that that was what was being rumored. So I hadn't really thought about this one that much. Volkov versus Pavlovich is a really interesting fight. So Volkov, I don't really think has strong odds of putting Pavlovich out unless Tommy Aspinall just stole Pavlovich's chin. But I don't view that as super likely with how thick that dude's neck is. I think he's gonna be able to take shots still. So I wouldn't really see Volkov finishing it on the feet as extremely likely. So if it ends on the feet, gotta think Pavlovich marches him down and continues to just hunt the other heavyweights, which is obviously super likely. And there's not really much analysis I need to do if that's the case, because we saw Pavlovich, when I say ruin, I mean ruin so many of those garbage Apex fight nights by just having the main event end instantly, by him just walking down some fat, shitty UFC NPC heavyweight and just hitting him with those really fast, crispy boxing combos. And that's what people miss about Pav. And remember, there was this guy who was complaining that Pavlovich didn't have the highest punch power of any heavyweight in UFC 4 or 5, it was rather. And the thing is that Pavlovich's punching power isn't crazy high. Can he thump? Obviously, the dude can thump. You can tell the dude can thump. But the thing that puts you out isn't his power, it's how good he is in combination. And the fact that he's able to land so many strikes on you at a time that really fucks you up more than anything. So that's really obviously what he would end up doing, is just walking Volkov down, limiting his ability to throw those long legs of his as kicks, and just get him behind that black line and really work those boxing combinations. That might be the most likely. But if Volkov's smart, then he's obviously looking to grapple here. Curtis Blades decided that that was a terrible game plan against Pavlovich, so he didn't try that, which was kind of disappointing. But Volkov just scored an Ezekiel choke, one of his first submissions in a really long time, against Tuivasa. And obviously Tuivasa is washed and eating Taco Bell in his fucking locker room before his main event fights now. So that's not an insane accomplishment. But we saw Uberim post horse meat take down and ultimately dominate and I think finish, if I remember correctly, Sergey Pavlovich. And sure, that was in his UFC debut. It was a long time ago, before his reign of terror. But you know that a loss can always upset the confidence of these guys. We saw what happened to Ngannou after his first loss in the UFC to Stipe Miocic. He came out and had a staring contest against Derek Lewis. It was embarrassing. And you could totally see something similar happen with Sergey Pavlovich. It depends on how he decides to bounce back from this loss. I know that he bounced back well from his loss against Uberim, but this is a different loss. He was essentially seconds away from fighting Jones if he's able to follow up on the shots that he landed on Tom Aspinall, then he's either fighting Jones or becoming champion when Jones retires because Jones is ducking him. It's one of the two things, which is great either way. You take that, right? But he's not there, and that can be really morally defeating when that's your whole purpose, because now you aren't one win away like you were there. You're not seconds away like you were there. You are who knows how many wins away. If Tom Aspinall holds onto the belt, you might need to piece together a lot of wins. If he has a lot of fresh contenders to fight in his division, then you might not get your chance for a while because he starched your ass out so badly. But you'll see when this fight happens what goes on exactly. If Volkov wins this, expect him to be taking Pavlovich down and submitting him, or brutally pounding him out to finish him on the ground. I don't see him winning this on the feet. I think Pavlovich is too dangerous, and you have to have the boxing power or be like Rebellis to Spain, where you can throw that head kick up fast enough and with enough confidence that Pavlovich isn't going to just like blitz and dominate you afterwards. Because if you can't say one of those things, then you're pretty boned. I forgot the rest of the fights, or at least I didn't forget. I'm going to have to remember them, but I like deleted my thing that had them. So it's off the dome from here. The next one was Kelvin Gastelum versus Daniel Rodriguez. Do you guys want to talk about that fight? I don't. I think Kelvin Gastelum is going to look great, and I think he's going to kick Daniel Rodriguez's ass. That's all I have to say. And then I guess all else I have to say is that Kelvin Gastelum will look good for like one or two more fights, fight someone good, and look like dog shit again. So we can be hyped for that cycle to proceed as well. Then, god damn it, I don't remember what the other fights are, and my thing got cleared of them. There was some fire matchups on here. Johnny Walker going against Volkan Uzdemir's on here, and then there's Shara Bullet versus Ihor Poteria. Is that guy's name? The dude who Fortnite danced on Shogun Hua in his retirement fight. That dude's kind of a douchebag for that. I ain't gonna lie. He's like a fun fighter to watch for sure. But like, you're in Brazil fighting like an 82-year-old Shogun Hua for his retirement fight. You knock him out and you hit a Fortnite dance on him, bro. Like, that's cringy as fuck, dude. I can't back that shit. And I love my Russian fighters, bro, but I cannot back that shit. So I'm hoping Shara Bullet looks good in this one. He's not going to be getting taken down like he somehow was against Bruno Silva. Imagine a Dagestani who sucks at wrestling. Isn't that fucking tragic? But that's Shara Bullet for you, and I mean his striking is really good, so that's good, and his eyes are really fucked as well. But yeah, that's a fun fight. So that should be a really fun way to start out the card. I hope one of them knocks the other fucker out, because honestly, they're both kind of losers. I don't have any problems with Ihor Pateria outside the octagon. I'm just not familiar with his antics outside the octagon, though, so he might be a piece of shit, but I'm not familiar. But I know that Shara Bullet beat the shit out of that dude just for like kissing his girlfriend at the mall. That shit was whack, dog. So he's not cool. Don't the Dagestanis don't ride with Shara Bullet fully, just so you know. There are some Dagestanis for sure who will fully ride with him, but it's not all of them. Okay, you'll get some pushback. Beating up random dudes in the mall ain't cool. He also almost lost that fight, which is crazy. And I'm talking about the one in the mall against the random dude. I'm not talking about like a UFC fight against like Bruno Silva or something, which is just, it's wild. It's out of here. But yeah, then the other one, Johnny Walker versus Volkan Uzdemir. I feel like either we're going to see a great Johnny Walker bounce back. I don't know what that looks like. Is that a crazy KO from him on Volkan Ozdemir? Is that him doing one of those really boring decisions like he did against Anthony Smith, where he does look super technical, but he's just like wasting his explosive athleticism and becoming a point fighter for no reason? I have no idea what that looks like, but I think that that's probably what's most likely. What could totally happen though is if we're on like a Johnny Walker like dip arc, then Volkan Ozdemir just hits a cartoonish KO on him where He might do something even goofier than he did when Jamal Hill knocked him out and he did the like starch up shit and then fell down, like delayed reaction type shit. It might be even goofier somehow than that. Like maybe he'll be like going for some spinning shit and get knocked out and then like fall like in like a twisted position on the floor or some stupid shit. Like if Johnny Walker loses this, trust me, it won't be by decision and it won't be boring when he gets knocked out either. It'll be some goofy fucking shit. That's what I see in my head right now. If Johnny Walker loses this, is it's just like fucked up. So all in all, this card's a fucking banger. I will say earlier this year, I did predict that they were going to come out big for Saudi Arabia and toss Islam on there against his next title defender. But it doesn't look like that's the plan since they have announced that this is going to be main eventing Will Khamzat Chimaev and Robert Whittaker. So I was wrong on that. I will take that. Still haven't gotten a main event pick wrong. I will be dropping the UFC 300 main event pick soon, and it's going to be spicy, so you get ready for it. It's not going to make anybody on Twitter salty, though, okay? Because he can't read it, alright? So you guys just stay tuned. Have a great rest of your night. Let me know what you think about these fights down below. Peace.